Welcome to another edition of Mixed Combat Radio. I am Matthew J. Hunter here today on December 14th. It is 12:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we have a ton of fights to talk about. Obviously, we had a Saturday from proverbial hell in terms of just the amount of fights we had to watch last Saturday. We had, 4 boxing events on Saturday around the world, and we had the one major UFC card, even though people were hating on it because they really didn't have a main event. But anyways, we had a ton of fights. We had Anthony Joshua versus Eric Molina, and Anthony Joshua just starched him. I don't think Eric Molina landed 5 punches in 3 rounds. It was pathetic, actually. Honestly, it was either Anthony Joshua being that good or Eric Molina being that bad that night. I just don't know. Then we had Joseph Parker beat Andy Ruiz Jr. in a very tight, close fight. I know one of my good friends over at the Boxing Voice, Box MD, said that he could have seen it as a draw. I don't really argue that. I thought Joseph Parker won, personally, but it was close. I'm just not a big fan of Andy Ruiz, and I thought the fight was kind of a little bit sloppy at times. It's hard to say. It wasn't the fight I was expecting. I was really impressed, though, with Joseph Parker's athleticism. I think he's very quick. Both his foot speed and his hand speed is quick for that division. I wonder if he could even cut down to I forget his dimensions, but I wonder if he could cut down to cruiserweight possibly. That would be interesting. Just see him that fast, that heavy at that division, because he doesn't really pack that much power at heavyweight compared to a Joshua or Wilder. And then we had a ton of fights in the UK. We had Dylan White versus Chisora in a possible heavyweight fight of the year. Great fight. I've only seen parts of it still, just because there's so many fights. So I don't want to dwell too much on the fights that were last weekend because there were so many. We had Charlo versus J Rock, and I thought Charlo just looked like the king of 154. Honestly, I thought that Charlo in that fight demonstrated to me the power, and B, the IQ/reflexes to pull off knockouts like that against high level competition. I think he could hurt Canelo. He is that powerful, that big, that fast. His timing, his accuracy on his counters is that good. So I think Charlo's the real deal. I know one of my good friends who calls into the Boxing Boys, Ferngoli, he thinks that Andrade would still beat Charlo, and I don't know. I mean, I still don't think that fight happens on 154. I think both guys need to move up, personally, just from a health safety standpoint, because I think Charlo just looked massive. Jamal Charlo just looked insanely big. He looked easily a 160 guy, if not 168. He looked like he could make super middleweight easily and not be hindered by the size difference or the speed difference, the power difference with those guys in those divisions. Imagine Jamal Charlo in 2 or 3 years against James DeGale. We could see that, and I could see a competitive fight, regardless of the weight difference. Then we had Terrence Crawford just demolishing, and outclassing. It was just, to me, it was beautiful. I know some guys did not like it. I don't know why they called Terrence Crawford running in that fight. I didn't see that at all. I thought that was just a masterclass, and he just purely in the truest definition of the word outboxing, he outboxed John Molina, and I can't wait to see. I can't wait to see Terrence Crawford. You can hear the garbage truck in the background. Yeah. I can't wait to see Terrence Crawford at 147. I think that is the true test of him. I think anyone at 140 is a wash for him. I don't think that guys like Ricky Burns again, do we really want to see that rematch? No. Julius Ndongo, even though I picked him against Tronovsky, I don't pick Ndongo against Terrence Crawford. That's ridiculous. It's Terrence Crawford. Terrence Crawford, skill-wise, could be, and in my opinion, is the best boxer in boxing right now. And if you don't see that, I think you were blinded by a pseudo subpar level of competition recently. Because I don't think guys like Thomas DeLorme, Hank Lundy, John Molina Jr., etc. are awful guys. They're not Rod Salkas. They're not Alexander Brands. They're more along the lines of a Sullivan Barrera, in a sense. A Isaac Chilemba. Like quality test, quality top 15 guys. They may not be top 5 guys, obviously, but they're still top 15. So I don't see the hate on the John Molina fight as much. It was a mismatch purely from a skill standpoint, and we saw that. But in terms of ranking, 140 isn't that deep. And John Molina Jr. did take Lucas Matisse to life and death. That still counts for something. I don't know. Obviously, it was a bad showing, and I think John Molina Jr. grew out the weight class. I think he's a natural 147 guy as well. I don't think he should be cutting 140 pounds anymore. But I don't think the criticisms for Terrence Crawford against John Molina Jr. are truly valid this time around, personally. Like the Thomas DeLorme fight, he was very cautious in that fight, more so than this one. I thought he was very active. Yeah, he was on the back foot, but he was throwing 2, 3, 4 punches at a time. He was rarely throwing single shots. So I don't see the issue with it at all. Then we had Abner Mares making a career comeback sort of fight against Jesus Saliar, and I picked Saliar to win, and I thought Mares was going to get finished, actually. And so I just have to say props to Mares. He looked awesome. I scored it for him. It was a interesting fight, especially in the first half, I would say. But then I think the conditioning, athleticism of Mares became a clear advantage, especially in like the last 3 or 4 rounds. I almost thought Mares swept those last couple rounds, last few rounds. So I think Mares versus anyone in that weight class. Let me check who is with him, who we have ranked with him in that weight class. So number 1, this is the Boxing Voices top 15 rankings. We have number 1, Carl Frampton, number 2, Leo Santa Cruz, number 3, Gary Russell, and number 4, Abner Mares. And right behind him is Lee Selby and Oscar Valdez. Those top 6 right there, if they just had like a round robin tournament, I think everyone in boxing would be happy, right? Like I think any one of those 6 matched up against the other one is entertaining. Then we have guys like Joseph Diaz waiting in the background. Scott Quigg moved up, but he just doesn't have the power in that division, so I don't know. Josh Warrington looks really good. Jorge Lara, Mark Magazio, Jonathan Barros, Oscar Escadon. We have a lot of good guys in this weight class, so I think Abner Mares is going to have plenty of competition. I just want to see him against really top guys because it is towards the end of his career. We have to accept that. Abner Mares is not a young guy. Yes, he scored a good victory, but that's because he was just a better boxer than Saliar, and we never really saw that because of the level of competition from Saliar. But Abner Mares versus Elise Selby, honestly, that would really fascinate me. I think from a pure money standpoint, how can you not have Abner Mares versus Oscar Valdez in LA? I just think that's the easy fight to put together. So I don't know. It'd be interesting. And then what else do we have this past weekend? We had Sergey Lepinets got a nice win against, I forget his opponent. I'm not going to butcher the name, Zapigava or whatever. But I thought Lepinets looked good. We have him ranked number 7 right now at light welterweight, in front of Ricky Burns and Ruslan Provodnikov, and behind Felix Diaz Jr. and Antonio Orozco. Those rankings are kind of weird. I probably need to fix those maybe. Ruslan's just like an outlier, and I don't know where he belongs. But I don't know. Lipinets versus. We have Orozco fighting this weekend. I would love to see Orozco versus Lipinets personally, and then see the winner of that against either like an Adrian Broner or Terrence Crawford. I think that'd be good matchmaking. Because I think right now Lipinets just gets hit a lot. That's why I think guys like Terrence Crawford just light him up. Honestly. But yeah, let's talk about the UFC card briefly. On That was on Saturday. We had Max Holloway versus Anthony Pettis, and it was an awesome card. Personally, I was kind of hyped on it, even without the the main event that everyone was kind of bitching about. Because I'm just, I love seeing Max Holloway fight. I love seeing Anthony Pettis fight. I thought it was an easy matchmaking opportunity for them for that fight, and it just worked perfectly. And now it looks like Max Holloway versus Jose Aldo will happen in Brooklyn at UFC 208. But Max Holloway I'm not gonna say just outboxed Anthony Pettis and outstruck him, but he kind of did. It was funny because Anthony Pettis clearly was more comfortable on his back and on the ground, and he was okay with going there. And Max Holloway wanted nothing to do with it. He kept letting Anthony Pettis get back up. And it was funny because I was watching the fight and I was thinking, man, Max Holloway is letting Anthony Pettis really dictate a lot. And of course, Anthony Pettis came out and said that he broke his right hand in the first round. But regardless of that, I thought he just let Anthony Pettis really have enough time and room and to really set up his rhythm. And Anthony Pettis still couldn't get it off. He still couldn't set up his rhythm right. So it was weird. I didn't really know what to expect of it. I going into the the second or third round, I thought Anthony Pettis was just gonna land a huge kick or something. But the steady aggression and progression that Holloway showed in his boxing and his body work just wore down Pettis eventually. And I think along with the broken hand, I think Pettis just wasn't in there really to win it. He was in there surviving. But kudos to Max Holloway. I think he's gonna wreck Jose Aldo. Or not wreck him, but I think he's gonna win clearly. Hold on one second. Sorry about that. But Jose Aldo, I think, could easily catch him and catch him continuously over rounds to win round A and B, hurt Holloway. I think Aldo is that good. Obviously, not to discredit Aldo. He's easily the number 2 guy in the division, but because of Conor McGregor and that whole bullshit. But I don't know. I just think something about momentum. I think people, and yes, Aldo is coming off the Frankie Edgar win, but that win was really close in a sense. It wasn't like Aldo went in there and just outclassed Frankie Edgar. He just outlanded him. He was just more accurate. His judgment of timing and accuracy and distance were just a little bit better than Frankie Edgar. And plus, he just, Frankie Edgar looked smaller. Frankie Edgar couldn't get on the inside of a better striker, better Muay Thai striker. So, I don't know. I think Holloway versus Aldo is going to be a very intriguing fight. I definitely think it's one that's probably going to go 4 or 5 rounds, honestly. I think it's going to go pretty far. But it's definitely a fight I can't wait to see. And I think it's in February or January. No, it can't be January. It must be like February or March. I forget. Anyways. And then we had Donald Cerrone knocking out Matt Brown. And that was kind of just a brutal knockout. That's kind of, honestly, kind of like, cringeworthy, especially against Matt Brown. Matt Brown's taken so much punishment. He's been hurt a lot recently. So it's just one of those things where I don't want to see anyone get hurt permanently. And I feel like Matt Brown is very close to that. So, I don't know. It's one of those things where certain people are going to have to go into, his corner and go, hey, Matt, we can't We can't in good conscience train you and keep doing this because it's bad for your health. Like it really is at this point. I'm not one to really tell people to retire, but that guy had a hard life. That guy basically was dead from a heroin overdose, and he almost fought for UFC title. So, I mean, Matt Brown's a hard man that's lived a hard life, and it's obvious that his durability is gone, and that happens, and we know what happens when a fighter continues to fight regardless of his durability issues, a la Chuck Liddell, a la Roy Jones Jr. Like, the list goes on and on. So I just don't want to see that happen. I just don't think it's something that we as fans should want to see either. That's just my personal opinion on it. But I may briefly talk about the Doho Choi and Cub Swanson fight, and then we're going to move on from last Saturday, just because it's already been talked about ad nauseum from other sites, other podcasts. I want to talk about all these huge fights this weekend. And we even had a fight early today, which I've already watched. That was a huge fight in boxing, but not a huge fight in boxing, but I had a huge person in a fight against a somewhat, mismatch. Anyways, that's boxing. But Cub Swanson versus Doho Choi, I thought was one of those fights that encapsulates what's awesome about MMA. The fact that it is so wild and chaotic compared to boxing at times. And it's funny because I think it was Jonathan Snowden who also covers boxing and MMA. And he's, he's just a great follow on Twitter. I don't have a Twitter handle on me. I think it's like just Jonathan Snowden. But, when you go from watching boxing MMA, there's something that happens as a viewer. You start realizing that, well, it's just harder. Like, if you go from watching boxing to watching MMA, what you realize is that the technique in MMA is so sloppy, especially the striking technique. MMA is so sloppy compared to boxing, but it's so much more exciting and wild at times, just overall, because there's more room for adaptability and creativism within the fight, because there's just more techniques. There's more things you can do. Not to say that boxing isn't exciting, but just to go from back and forth watching boxing and MMA on the same day, it's kind of a hard transition. But Cub Swanson and Doho Choi, I thought, had that technique to where it kind of made you forget about that aspect of going back and forth and watching two different sports like this. Because Cub Swanson actually has legit boxing skills at times. He wouldn't be a championship level boxer, but he'd be a journeyman. He has skills. And then Doho Choi just had that chin, that type of steel chin, that iron chin, that doesn't matter technique, whatever, even though he has great technique, great timing, great judgment at distance. But just that ability to absorb the punishment and continue to fight translates sloppy technique. It just does. It makes you want to root for that person. So, I thought Cub Swanson won the fight. I thought it was a great fight. I don't think it was fight of the year. I don't know why people are calling it that, honestly. But it definitely fight of the night. Definitely a great fight. I hope you enjoy the free portion of our show, Mixed Combat Radio. The rest of our show and the rest of our content is provided at patreon.com/Mixed Combat Radio. The link will be provided in the description of this video. And if you want to catch the rest of our preview of this weekend's upcoming action and the rest of our content, just head on over there. And it's only $1 a month at least. And then you can get all the content. Have a good one.